Here's a number that stopped me cold. According to a 2023 Gallup study, adults over 50 report the sharpest drop in sense of purpose of any age group, sharper than teenagers, sharper than new retirees. And the trigger isn't usually illness. It's a life event that was supposed to be normal. A divorce, a last child leaving home, a career that quietly ended, a spouse who died too soon. The plan ran out, and nobody told you what comes next. If that lands somewhere familiar, this video is for you. Because the science says something genuinely surprising. The brain over 50 is uniquely equipped to rebuild identity. Not despite your age, because of it. Let's talk about how. Most of us, by our 40s or early 50s, have built what psychologists call an identity anchored in roles. You're the provider, the parent, the professional, the partner. Those roles aren't shallow, they're real, and they matter. But here's the problem. They're also borrowed. They come with a script written by someone else, by culture, by expectation, by the life you were handed at 22. And then, one day, sometimes gradually, sometimes overnight, the script runs out. Divorce after 50 now accounts for more than a quarter of all divorces in the US and UK. Empty nest syndrome affects an estimated 1 in 3 parents, regardless of how much they wanted their kids to launch. Career loss after 55 is one of the most psychologically destabilizing events a person can experience, not just financially, but existentially. The question isn't, what do I do now? The real question is, who am I now? And here's where the neuroscience gets interesting. There's a concept in psychology called narrative identity. The idea that your sense of self is literally a story you tell yourself about who you are, where you've been, and where you're heading. The research of Dan McAdams at Northwestern University shows that people who successfully navigate major life transitions are not people who avoided disruption. They're people who got good at revising their story. They treat the disruption not as the end of the chapter, but as the beginning of a new one. Crystallized intelligence. The accumulated wisdom, pattern recognition, and emotional regulation that builds over decades peaks after 50. While raw processing speed does slow slightly with age, your capacity for nuanced judgment, emotional insight, and long-range thinking is actually at its highest point. A 2019 Harvard study found that emotional well-being and life satisfaction follow a U-curve, dipping in midlife, then rising steadily after 55 for those who engage actively with meaning-making. Translation: you are not too late. You may, in fact, be exactly on time. So what does identity rebuilding actually look like? The research points to 4 anchors. Pillar 1. Health as identity, not just hygiene. Something shifts when you stop treating your body as the vehicle and start treating it as part of who you are. People who successfully reinvent after 50 almost universally describe a renewed relationship with physical health, not as vanity, but as agency. I control this. I am building something here. Pillar 2. Relationships you chose, not just inherited. After a divorce or an empty nest, many people discover that their social world was almost entirely built around roles: the couple's friends, the school-run parents, the work colleagues. When the role goes, the relationship infrastructure often goes with it. The antidote is what researchers call chosen community, friendships built around shared values and interests rather than shared circumstance. Pillar 3. Contribution that feels like yours. Ikigai, the Japanese concept of reason for being, sits at the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can be sustained by. After 50, many people discover that the most fulfilling version of contribution is no longer primarily financial. It becomes mentorship, creative work, volunteering, teaching, caregiving with intention. Pillar 4. A purpose horizon you build deliberately. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, wrote that meaning is not found, it is made. That framing matters at 55 as much as it did in Frankl's context. purpose after 50 is rarely handed to you. It is constructed incrementally through action. Here's a practical tool, something you can actually do this week. It's called the Identity Audit, and it takes about 20 minutes with a pen and paper. Write down your answers to these 4 questions. 1. What roles have I been performing that no longer fit who I actually am? 2. What values have I consistently held across every version of my life? The things that were true at 25, at 40, and are still true now. 3. What activities make me lose track of time, not as an escape, but as an expression of something real in me? 4. If I had no audience, no one watching, no one to impress, what would I spend my days doing? The gap between your answers to question 1 and your answers to questions 2 through 4, that gap is the map. You're not starting from zero. You're starting from here, with decades of self-knowledge, hard-won skill, and a nervous system that has survived everything that tried to stop you. One warning before we get to the action plan. There is a version of reinvention that doesn't work, and it's the most common one. It's reinvention as performance. The frantic pivot, the LinkedIn makeover, the conspicuously youthful hobby adopted to prove something. The research on successful identity transitions, from the work of Herminia Ibarra at London Business School, shows that durable reinvention almost always happens through small experimental steps, not grand gestures. Ibarra calls this working identity, the idea that you don't figure out who you are and then act. You try things. You notice what feels resonant. You iterate. The first chapter doesn't tell you the ending. It just gets you to the second chapter. Here's what I want you to do this week. Just one thing. Do the identity audit I described earlier, but add one step. Take your answer to question 3, the thing that makes you lose track of time, and schedule 90 minutes with it in the next 7 days. Not to produce anything, not to perform it for anyone, just to be in it. That's it. 90 minutes. Something that's yours. This week. Because the research on identity reconstruction is consistent on one point. You don't think your way into a new self. You do your way there. Starting over at 55 is not a consolation prize. The people who do it well, and there is real science behind who does it well, don't go back to who they were. They build something that couldn't have existed without everything that came before. You're not rebuilding from rubble. You're building with material. If you know someone sitting with a version of this question right now, a friend, a sibling, someone in a transition they didn't choose, share this video. Sometimes the most useful thing we can do is hand someone the right words at the right moment. Stay sharp.